Hello, thank you for being here. Thank you, Andre, for the beautiful lies you told about me. I found out new stuff about myself. This is the first time I'm in front of a movie screen and not looking towards it. I hope this will work out. So, one of my pet peeves for the last 8 years has been indie game architecture in general for games, because since I've been a small child, I think we've all played a bunch of games that looked similar and were built on the same platform. And it seemed that if you build the right platform, you can build any game you want in a short amount of time. So I focused in the past few years on building an architecture that you can build any game on, and you can build it on fast, and you can build it on very, very well. First off, a few words about me. Andrei said most of what mattered. I've been working in gaming for about 10 years now. I worked in the medical field before that. I have a very good beer time story if you want to hear it about why I left the medical field. But right now I'm in gaming, in indie gaming no less, and I'm focusing on mobile titles. I'm also teaching university courses for game development, which is really amazing fun. If you have any ideas about that, we're all welcome to talk about that later. So, the main attraction about indie gaming is that you think you can do whatever you want. Most of us working in the industry have always wanted to build our own game at one point. Some of us did, some of us have been stuck doing other people's ideas for a very long time. Other people really want to build games, but they are from outside the industry and have no idea what they would do to actually start working on a game. This presentation is supposed to actually show you some of my experiences with building games alongside people who are either industry veterans or people coming into the industry for the first time. I love this quote. This quote is a very interesting outlook on what we aim to do here in indie game development. Indie is a very big word. It applies to a bunch of studios. Our studio has 10 people in it, and we're indie. There are people out there with 2 people in them, and they're indie. And Ember Studios claims they're indie, and they are 298 strong, if I can remember correctly. So indie is a very big word. But we'll use it. We'll use it for people who want to build their own games and not use anyone else's franchises or IPs or ideas. So who's getting into indie dev? In indie dev, we have veterans, people coming from the industry like I did, people who have been working in games for a long time, and we have people from outside the industry who think that the indie industry is a very, very pink place with butterflies rolling all over and that you can do whatever you want. And frankly, this is always what happens when you start something new. Even if you're in a huge company or a very small company, whenever you try to build something from scratch, it eventually ends up being a huge mess. And I did this for so many times that I really wanted to change it. I wanted to start a project and make it work from the beginning, make it into something extendable that I can use in the future, not just make a complete mess out of whatever game I am building on. So, talking about architecture and software architecture with people who here is an engineer or has engineering backgrounds. All right, so most of you should know what I'm talking about. Architecture is a very is a subject people don't usually talk about. In big companies, the architecture is usually top driven. People tell you what to do. You can't change a lot of things. And in indie gaming, when you start your own project, be it at home or with a friend or at school, at college, you don't really think about architecture. And it's really important before starting to work on anything to decide what you're trying to build. And for vets like I was when I left EA to found my own company, I wanted to do things right. And I had the experience of a big company behind me. I wanted to build everything that they had. And they had a lot of things. And everything was lovely, like you've seen before with automation tools and build machines and stuff like that. Stuff you can't really afford on an indie budget. And everyone I tried to work with wouldn't even listen about architecture. Why would they listen? They just wanted to see a game being built. They didn't want to hear about modules and interfaces and stuff like that. So the main idea here is to find a compromise, because our experience in big companies or whatever you can find online from engineers working in big companies and working in gaming for a long time is actually very worthwhile. A game without a solid architecture will fail at its first tryout. A prototype that works with 10 people may not work with 10,000 people. And on the other hand, indie companies don't usually have the resources, the time, or the people to build something very, very complex. So there's a very sweet line between a complex architecture and none at all. I like this quote as well because while you're working on your own game, it's really, really easy to lose sight of what you are trying to accomplish. You get new ideas, new features, you get excited, you show the game to your mom, you show the game to your girlfriend. They have ideas as well, you want to put them in it too. And by the end of the day, you have a Christmas tree of a product that cannot go anywhere. So we have to have a very simple mindset. We have to have clarity, direction, a view of limited resources. That's something very few people understand. We have in indie games, we have limited resources. Even if you have some money that you have stowed away, even if your friends fund you or you have someone else funding you, there's always limited resources, be it time, money, or people. If you start on an indie route with 2 friends, for example, at any one time, one of those friends can become pregnant, their wives can become pregnant, they could get a very good job offer, and they could leave. They are limited, and you need to treat them as such. You need to treat yourselves as such. If you work for 1 year or 2 years without any actual result, would you be able to go on? Would you not just quit and get hired for a large amount of money? Maybe you can. Maybe your actual dedication is a resource you can use sparingly. Maybe it lasts like 6 months or 12 months or 18 months. It's not infinite. 3 years ago, I was in a company in which I owned 28.3%. My resources, my availability to work in a company where I owned 28.3% was 16 months. That's all I could muster. After 16 months, I found myself unable to continue. I had to leave. I had to leave because I owned too little of it. So you have to ask yourselves, how long can you actually work on something without these results or without money or without any financial or commercial success? Because indie gaming can be about that as well. And the last one, and the most important, is attention to detail. In a big company, usually there's someone cleaning up your mess. There's a backup for everything. In indie gaming, there's a backup for nothing. So if you do something, you have to do it right the first time. This is a minimal architecture for an indie game. These are the modules that I like to start with. I will not go through each of them. We only have 25 minutes. I would like to. I love this kind of stuff, but I won't. Suffice it to say, it's not as simple as it sounds, but it's not as complex as it could be. And now I will go through a few of the main principles behind architecture that I find really important. They're not about architecture per se, they're also about flow and about how to work in a very small team or how to work with different people. For example, the first point of business is assets. When you're in indie gaming, you get assets from wherever you can. You get sprites of the internet, you can buy 3D models, you have a very good friend who's an artist, you have a team member who's an artist. And you need to have everyone do the same thing. Like, for example, if everyone outputs PNGs with 24 bits, that's it. If all the textures need to be power of 2, that's it. If all the 3D meshes need to have at most 5,000 polygons, that's it. Clear rules, and you'll have your artists, your friends, your freelancers or online or whatever, working with the same specifics. Because in indie, you don't have the resources of converting the whole project 6 months later. Dev tools. That's what the previous speaker was talking about. And when I was at EA, we had a bunch of dev tools I still miss to this day. You don't need all of them. You need some of them. For example, you need version control. You cannot build anything without version control. Surprisingly, I found people who tried to build something, any game without version control. They used Dropbox instead of anything else. They had an external drive. They made a backup weekly. That just won't work. So Git, Perforce, SVN, whatever your flavor is, version control. If you don't know what that is, look it up. If you do know what it is, your life is better with it. debug info and stuff like that I won't even get into. And one of the most important dev tools that has to be with you from start to finish is user tracking. You need to be able to know what your users are doing at all times, even from the most early access version of your game. You give your game to your mother, you give your game to your girlfriend, your friends, anyone online. You need to know what they are doing without actually looking at them doing it. Because otherwise, your people, your users will be using your product like this. This guy is trying to drink some water, but he cannot use the glass. That's how most of our games are played. After you understand that most of your users are stupid, you will actually build better games for it. Coding style, I won't go through it in detail, but suffice it to say that you really need to adhere to your coding style. Once you leave a company or once you start working on your own, you really need to be stricter than ever. You cannot allow yourself to be sloppy because there's no one cleaning after you. And, well, 2 months from now, you won't understand a thing, and the game will be crashing and burning. That's one of the codes I really like as well. User interface. Most of the huge companies have in-house design tools. You won't build any, you won't need any, and you will just use the most simple pop-ups, menus, and screens that you can find. In indie gaming, it's mostly all about the gameplay anyway, so unless you have a menu-centric game, focus on the gameplay, not on anything else. Navigation. This is one thing I actually got out of working at a big company. Navigation is very, very important in games. It's very important for the game designer to be able to change the user flow without the aid of a programmer. For example, you have a tutorial. Maybe you want to see how the game feels without it. I don't know. The game designer should be able to do that without any change in code. So one of the things we do first, before anything, for a new game, we have a navigation manager. We have navigation files that anyone can change. They are human readable. So for example, if I just want to go splash screen, 2nd level, or splash screen, 14th level, I can do that without recompiling the game. That's really, really important. For testing, for game design, for a bunch of other reasons. Localization. The first thing I did when I started a new game was get really excited about a new localization server that would be serving Chinese and Korean and Japanese and English and French to our game in real time, and you could change the translations in real time. Those are 2 weeks of my life I will never get back because we never used it, we are not using it, and currently we have XML files hosted locally, and that's it. So if you are in indie dev groups on Facebook, there's always some company offering localization services. Always there's someone there to help you. You don't need to build your own, like really not. Sounds, some people employ sound artists if you can afford them. If they are your friends, more power to you. If not, a small studio with 4, 5, 10 people like we are cannot actually use a sound engineer. We use what we can. We have part-time sound engineers. We use freelancers. We buy sounds online. There's no reason to have a Foley studio just for a casual game, like really. All right, so enough with the lecturing. I'm going to tell you what I myself did and where I went wrong. My personal experience with this is based on this game, my first game, our first game. It's Amber, A Quest in Torch Valley. It was built very poorly. The game design was great. Technically speaking, we did all the blunders we could. The game is now on Steam, but it's not launched yet. I'm not sure if it will ever be. And it taught me a lot about what indie development means, about what building game means. And this is a huge list of all of our mistakes. We did a bunch of stuff we didn't have to. We didn't do a bunch of stuff we had to do. So for example, we had Google, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever integration. People never used that. We shouldn't have. We had a lot of ad providers. We had a lot of integration with third parties we didn't use. We had a database on server with what players did. We had a random level generator we never used. I had built a build machine that would output a build every single night. I had a soak manager. Who here knows what a soak is? Soaking a game is when you leave it with an AI, like an AI is pretending to play it, but it's actually using hooks, like key hooks. It's actually pressing the keys. And it's playing the game for like 10 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours, and at times, some games crash, some games result in overflows or in memory leaks. And a soak is very good because you can actually leave your game to dry. It's what we used on FIFA. It's what no indie company should ever use unless their game is huge. It still works, our soak manager, so I can leave the game to be played for hours at a time on my PC, but unfortunately real players don't do that because players don't play the game because it's awful. What we should have done, and we did, well, almost, was tracking, navigation, simple menus, and a very, very precise sense of gameplay, of where we want to take the user. Since then, we built a bunch of other games. We built educational games, AR apps. We built mobile games we launched ourselves. We built mobile games that we published. And our architecture looks like this. It's very modular. It's very clean. You can pick a bunch of features to opt in or opt out of for every new game we built. And we can have sorry? Anyway. You can build a new game in like 2 days or 3 days, having all the basic functionality like Facebook, tracking, navigation, a simple main menu, levels, user manager, stuff like that. We now have it, and we use this for every single game we make. For example, the last game this architecture was used on is this one, which we are very proud of because it's currently being featured on Apple all over the world. It's much simpler, it's much tinier, and it works a lot better than the other one. Based on this one, we will start building all of our new games using the same architecture with minimal change, and if we spot a bug in the architecture, we'll change it for all our games so that they are all protected and up to date. So, to have a very short review on what I'm trying to actually share with you guys is first, don't over-engineer anything ever. Just build the simplest thing you can to make it work, as long as it does. Be consistent. Don't use different kinds of assets, different kinds of languages, different kinds of whatever. Everyone should be working under the same rules at all times. And if there's anything that you want to add after the plan has been already made, be wary. Follow the plan. Follow the initial design. You knew what game you wanted to make. Try to make that game. Too many people are always susceptible to their friends or family or users online telling them how they should change their game. Never change your game based on one person's opinion. And for the love of God, don't change the architecture without checking with everyone first. We have too many coders just changing a small, tiny piece of the game and then nothing works anymore. We have clients, we have servers, we have modules. If we want to change them, we'll change them consistently, all over the board. And finally, always think modular. Whatever you do needs to be used on your second game, on your third game, on your fourth game. Because frankly, it's a very slim chance that your first game will be a huge hit. Most likely your second game will not be a huge hit. And you need to learn your lessons, and you need to add skills to yourself, to your team, but most importantly, you can build bricks, and you can use those bricks for future games. One brick with a sound manager, for example, you can use for all subsequent games. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel all over again every single time, because your 10th game may be very successful, and it needs to be built with bricks that are very solid, that can work for 10 people, for 1,000 people, or for 1 million players at a time. And I think that's it. I think I'm a software engineer. If you want to talk about anything software engineer architecture related, you can find me on that email address over there. I know this talk has been amazing, but please, my right hand has just been broken, so don't squeeze too hard when you are congratulating me on the way out. Cheers. If we have time for questions.
What's your take on testing indie games? I mean, the big companies always have huge testing departments, and they are doing it in a very professional manner.
Well, frankly, this is something you should do as well. You won't ever afford a testing department, nor should you, because you'll only be using it like 1 month out of 12 every year. We externalize. We have had an amazing experience with outsourcing testing, and you really should do it. Our game was finished, Battle Golf was finished in early May or June, I think. Due to bugs, we launched it 2 weeks ago because our external testing team really found amazing bugs. Bugs like getting a call while recording your gameplay crashes the game, for example. And you really need testing. And frankly, this is the main difference between a prototype and a product. And I think I was talking to one of my colleagues outside, and so few people know the difference between a prototype and a product. A prototype is what you'll see outside in the indie gala. It's what you can do in 2 weeks or 1 month or 2 months at home. A product is something you can launch for thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and it will work consistently with no issues for all of them, delivering the same experience for all of them, no matter what their device, what their region, or what their background is. So yes, it's very important. Thank you for the question.
Can you share who tested your game?
Yes, why test? And well, why test? Because you have to, like really. Anyone else? Please. That's an amazing question. For those of you who didn't hear it, he asked, when do you let go of a game? Well, frankly, it's always hard to let go because usually in indie games, you love your games. So it's really hard to give up on something you love. But it's, especially if you have limited resources, it's very important to fail fast. Failing fast means that you find your earliest exit and you use it. The first sign that your game is not a very good one is unfortunately the place where you have to let go. So, for example, if you pitch the game to 4 people at one table, and only one of them likes it, that may be an exit point. If you invest money in it and you make a prototype and you don't like it, that's an exit point. If you decided you like your prototype, but then you fund, like you put 1,000 people in your game, if you market your game to 1,000 people by using ads, and for example, you have a first day retention of 10%, that's an exit point as well. So you have to really fail fast. That's why it's very important that you are here. You can talk to people who have had successful games. You can check their numbers, their figures, and if your first numbers are not in that ballpark, if they are really low, you have to let go, like really. And like you are here with your game at the indie gala. If people don't like your game, leave it be. I know you worked on it. I know people love it. But if not enough people are actually engaged in it, it's something I always talk about. It's the spent cost fallacy. Because you invested time in something, it doesn't mean it values more. It's worth more than something you start today, because you cannot take back the time you invested, but you can take back the time you won't invest in the future. So I hope I partially answered your question. Thank you. Anyone else? Please.
It's okay to use Unity or tools like that, or to build your own tools?
It's never okay to build your own tools. That's never the answer. Unity is a very good answer. It's not an answer to all the questions. There are other engines out there. There are other tech out there. But it's really important to know that building your own tools doesn't always mean just building one tool. It means maintaining it. For example, our game, so Battle Golf, was launched on Apple. We ported it to Android in 3 days, to WebGL in 3 days as well, and it works on PC because it just does. To do that with your in-house engine would be folly. When iOS 10.5.17 comes out and your game crashes, you won't know why. So it's really important to keep yourself tethered, anchored to the big guys in the industry who can pull you forward, because they are always updating their tech, and they will update your tech with it. You need to focus on the gameplay and user experience. That's it. Not hardware stuff, not platform stuff, not really low level engineering that, frankly, only the big guys can afford to look at. I hope I answered your question. Thank you. Anyone else? Well then, many thanks for answering, for asking me stuff, and many thanks for listening to me, and I hope we'll see you in the hallway and we'll talk some more.